think I realized that we were finishing up this semester, so hopefully we'll give you an intellectual fireworks show of sorts. We'll do our best. So yeah, Laura, gosh, I can't believe it's been like 4 years or something. You know, I had done a little bit of work in local food with wineries, and then Laura approached me and had kind of a deeper background and interest in local food. So we started writing grants, and of course there's a real emphasis in the state on strengthening rural economies. There's like a foodie interest in like local food movements. And so this kind of represents the start of what was the foundation of our local food research. But then I'm also going to be sharing some applied message testing studies that I've conducted with some of the people in this room here today. We're excited to look at not only how do you do the market research, but how do you operationalize those messages and test what's most effective with different consumers. So Dominique kind of briefly went into my role, but I just want to spend about 30 seconds talking about my extension role. So in extension, I don't know how many of you are familiar with extension, but the basic idea of land-grant university is to take the science of the university through the far-flung corners of the state, not keep it in the ivory tower. However, a lot of the people that I work with, like natural resource professionals, operate off of a mindset that, you know, if only people knew what I knew, they would surely change their behaviors. I'm sure Dominique's exposed you through this class of knowledge deficit models and these different things. So a lot of times what I do is I work with people to get them to think through the eyes of their target audience, through their consumers. And so I was also really brought in, I think I was an anomaly when I was first brought in, because I was like a behavior change guy, and I'd stand next to the information education person. And of course I'm an educator, I mean I'm a professor, but I teach about behavior change, about persuasion and marketing, as opposed to how do you engage people and how do you educate people. I care about this insofar as they contribute to behavior change. So it's a little different orientation than a lot of my extension colleagues. The research I'm about to show you was funded by the UW Consortium for Extension and Research in Agricultural and Natural Resources. This is a grant opportunity that's intended to bring together people from different campuses, create greater collaborations across the different campuses. So this particular study I'm going to share with you is done with David Trechter with the UW River Falls Survey Center. And broadly speaking, you know, there's a lot of important metrics you can do with local food, right? Like food access, social justice issues. Laura and I made the mindful decision to focus on helping farmers make more money and getting a higher premium on their products. That doesn't mean that all those other dependent variables that you might think of aren't equally as important or even mutually exclusive, but we were very mindful in what we picked because in my extension role, I wanted to see like how can we make these farmers be more viable, but I also want to honor the importance of those other things. And some of the things I'll be talking about with Aaron, that Aaron Piot, who's in the back, has contributed to, is how do we combine social justice concerns and diversity, representation, and different things. And it's challenging, some of these things. They're thorny. So in developing this survey, I've done a lot of surveys now. I'm feeling pretty middle-aged, like dozens and dozens of them. But broadly speaking, you know, we start with a literature review, and we look at, well, what do we already know about the food? You know, what's good stuff out there? And we found some good things there, but also holes in the literature, as is often the case. Also had some really good partners, the UW Extension Food Systems team, with which Aaron has served as kind of our primary conduit and ambassador, but making sure we're getting feedback from people all over the state that work with local food systems. Is this information spoken clearly, written clearly? Is it going to be impactful to your constituents? FairShare, I don't think Erica's here today, is another nonprofit food advocacy group that was also a really important partner in getting this word out. And then we did a pilot testing, what we usually call our friends and family pilot test, to make sure that the variables are distributed normally, to make sure that the questions are clear, but put the survey through what Laura will be sharing with you momentarily through a pretty robust test. And to be honest with you, I think it was a pretty good survey. We didn't get a lot of post hoc criticisms of it. Laura, so what's going to happen next is Laura's going to talk about our local food survey results that her dissertation is in large measure dependent on. And then I'm going to talk about two follow-up studies that Ann Nardi helped lead, and that Aaron and Kristen Runge, also a student in our department, helped lead about how to operationalize these ideas. So Laura?
Thanks, Bret. So Bret mentioned our partner in River Falls, David Trechter. He runs the survey center up there. And so David administered the survey. It was a paper mail survey that went to a random sample of Wisconsin households. And we had a 26% response rate. But the analysis I'm going to show you focuses on just people that indicated on the survey that they did half or more of the food shopping. So in terms of demographics, the sample matched Wisconsin pretty well. It trended a little bit older than we would have expected and a little bit more female. But in terms of income and education, it matched the state. And we also found that the sample was primarily white, which also matches Wisconsin. But it does mean that these results can't be generalized to a more diverse audience, and other research would need to look into that. And we also found a pretty good spread in terms of how people identify themselves in terms of political ideology, with 40% saying they're conservative and about 30% each saying they're either moderate or liberal. One of the things we wanted to know on the survey is what Wisconsin means to people, because there is no legal definition of local food. So we had a list of different things on the survey, and we asked, in terms of geography, does local mean this to you? Yes, no, or not sure. And we found widespread agreement that people felt like Wisconsin means local. And some agreement about local food meaning something in terms of mileage. About 3/4 of people said 50 miles or a 1-hour drive not local to them, and much less agreement about 100 miles. So that's consistent with other research that finds some people like political boundaries, some people like this idea of mileage, but we went a step further and also asked people, how about these other states? Do those mean local food to you? And what we found was, no, they don't. People don't think of Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, or Minnesota as local. We had people's zip codes, so we also divided the sample up into where people live in terms of the region of Wisconsin. We thought maybe people in the Northeast would think Michigan means local because they're next to the UP. But they don't for the most part. The one exception is people in northwestern Wisconsin. More than half of them do think Minnesota means local. And when we talked to our partners up there, we went and presented to David Trechter's Ag Econ class. They were like, yeah, that makes sense to us. We like Minnesota up here. So I don't know what's up with Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa, but Minnesota is perhaps a more friendly ally in terms of food. Another consequence of this is about marketing, thinking about, are you going to promote a product in terms of Wisconsin, or are you going to focus on mileage? And it also suggests that, at least for some people, local food isn't just an environmental issue. Because if you were worried about carbon emissions and food miles, clearly you would think more people would be into that idea. So here's just an example of marketing. We have a state branding program here called Something Special from Wisconsin. So you could have a sign that really emphasizes that idea, versus this is a sign from Metcalfe's where they put food miles up. And Bret's going to be talking a little bit later about a project that Ann Nardi did that explored this a little bit more. Another thing we wanted to know on the survey was about giving local food a premium. So we had a question about, if you have this bag of potatoes from Wisconsin, how much would you give that if that was actually labeled as from the USA instead of Wisconsin? And we found that about 1/3 of the people want to pay the same, whether or not these are from Wisconsin or generically the US. But 64% said they want to give more to the Wisconsin potatoes, and on average it was $1 more. So this was just a single survey question, so I wouldn't read too much into the price, but the big idea is that people do think local food deserves a premium. We asked people, in terms of buying produce, what attributes are important. This question is on a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 means not at all and 5 means a great deal. And what we found was that when it comes to purchasing, people prioritize that the produce is fresh and tasty. Right in the middle here is Wisconsin grown, and certified organic, which sometimes gets lumped in with local food, is at the very bottom. So this could mean people don't know what organic means, because we also asked about grown without chemicals, and people rank that more highly than certified organic. And a big part of being certified organic is the produce can't be sprayed with any synthetic chemicals. It could also mean certified organic just isn't as important to consumers, that if they hear it, something's grown without chemicals, that's enough. So this has a potentially big implication for Wisconsin farms, since we have so many organic farms here. We have more organic dairy and beef farms than any state in the country, and when it comes to total farms with all products, we're number 2 right behind California, both in numbers and acreage. So this could be troubling for organic farmers here that are going to want to capture a premium, not only for being organic, but also for being local. There isn't a whole lot of other data about Wisconsin consumers specifically, but there is one study, a little older, from 2001, in a smaller sample, but they found a really similar trend where people ranked taste and quality of produce really high. State grown is kind of in the middle, and organic was also on the bottom. Then we asked people, when it comes to local produce specifically, does local produce have certain attributes more than non-local produce? And people generally agreed local produce helps local farmers more, not a big surprise. They also said it's fresher and tastier, which is really good news because those are the attributes that people prioritize with produce in general. There's less agreement when it came to issues that might speak to the environment, like local food is good for conservation or results in less pollution. And it turns out that that's something that liberals and conservatives differ on. So when we divided the sample up by political ideology, we found that liberals felt like local produce is good for the environment, and conservatives didn't feel as strongly about that. Liberals also thought local food is more beneficial in terms of the economy and health. But liberals and conservatives still buy as much local produce as each other, and they still visit the farmers market as much as each other. So one thing that might be going on is that they felt the same about quality, that local food is superior in terms of quality, and it might be that not all of these perceptions are actually translating to behavior. So as long as conservatives think local food is high quality, they're going to be buying as much as liberals, who think it's great for all these other reasons also. So other than beliefs, another kind of perception we looked at was social norms. So this is this idea that we look to others to guide our behavior. And we looked at two kinds of norms specifically. Injunctive norms, which are what we think other people want us to do. So this is more about approval. And descriptive norms, which is what we think other people are actually doing. And other research looking at local food hasn't really looked at social norms a whole lot. And the studies that have focused on injunctive norms. But what we found actually was that descriptive norms were a really strong predictor of behavior and injunctive norms were not at all. So in terms of marketing, the implication would be not to make it out for local food to be something about approval. It's not like it's the right thing to do or the good thing to do, but you want to try to convey that other people are doing it. So you could do that visually through a photo of maybe two typical Wisconsin-looking people eating local produce together. Or you can do it with language. For example, 75% of Wisconsin consumers think local fruits and vegetables are fresher. So Bret actually did some message testing related to this, and I'm going to turn this back over to him.
Fantastic, thanks. So this was super exciting for me because a lot of times when you do a cross-sectional market research survey, you can with full integrity say what Laura just reported to you, right? That fresh and tasty is most important, social norms are this. But we also know, for instance, when people say they'll pay an extra $1 premium on potatoes, that people don't always do what they say they're going to do. And there's usually actually, if you look at like meta-analysis of theories, like the theory of planned behavior, there's usually like a 0.2 something correlation between intention and behavior, right? So when you actually test these messages out about what should be most effective with what is actually most effective, you see a different sets of insights emerge. And this was the first study of its nature that I have done. So I'm going to show two of these, both Aaron's in the room, and I'll talk about this study first, then Ann also did another study, which had strikingly similar results, which I didn't realize until we pulled this presentation together, which was super exciting. But basically, Kristen Runge, who just defended recently, I don't know that she's fully submitted, but another strong LSC PhD grad, and Aaron, who runs the food systems team, we pulled together a team to say, let's take the survey results and do a social media marketing test to promote community-supported agriculture, CSA farmers. How many of you are familiar with CSAs? Do you need any background here? So basically you buy a share. And so every week or two you get a box. It could be, usually you have to go to pick it up at a coffee shop or some agreed upon spot. But we wanted to help direct market farmers, people that aren't going through intermediaries like a grocery store. Because we in the long term would like to set up a toolkit, right? Because a lot of farmers don't go into farming thinking, boy, this would be a great chance to enhance my social media marketing skills. It's more about like the land, and farming, this kind of stuff. So that was our aim. So customers up front for the growing season. As far as the methods go, so what we did is that obviously there's different farms, there's different parts of the state. What you see in Madison or Stevens Point may not be the same as what you see in Wausau or a Kanto, for example. They're not the same for local climates, they're not the same economies, etc. So Aaron and I thought we were pretty mindful about the whole thing, but we very consciously picked 4 different farms from around the state, because we didn't want to depend what I'm about to share with you just based on one farm. We wanted to get some averages across farms. So we got 4 different farms from throughout the state with different areas, different kind of ideologies to some degree, and spent $400 on each farm. And we ran 4 different theoretically informed, conceptually distinct advertisement that were based on the results that Laura and I collected. The 4 big ad types, which you can see came right out of the research that we did together, was fresh and tasty, kind of a product-centric, like this is delicious, get your CSA. What I call Wisconsin tribalism, which is just that, it doesn't make sense that I can be up in, Spooner and call Wisconsin local down in Milwaukee, but literally I could shoot a, slingshot and practically hit Minnesota, but Wisconsin's local, right? Badgers, go Badgers. My blood literally, runs Badger red. So there's kind of this Wisconsin theme of tribalism. Then there's you saw too, number 1 for why people buy local food is helping local farmers. So this is a category that I have dubbed the farmer personified. That is that I can now put a face on my farmer rather than just have this industrialized food system where I don't know where things are coming from. And then the 4th one, as Laura pointed out, in the case of descriptive norms, and there's a long literature about the power of social norms in social marketing and persuasion campaigns. So we created a series of advertisements that we did our best to operationalize and communicate these central constructs. And the way we judge, and I'll show you examples in just a second, is so we use Facebook, right? Paid targeted Facebook advertising. And so we're looking at things like, reach is somewhat equal to the way we spent the money. But then engagement, did people click through and drive through further into the website? And then we're also doing follow-up calls on sales, like how many additional sales did you get? The way we've set it up, we actually have to call up, but those are the metrics that we're looking at. And just in terms of numbers alone, for $1,200, I don't know if Kristen shared this with you, we reached about 250,000 posters. In the social media world, those are people that just saw it, right? You're scrolling down your feed and you didn't necessarily press it. In the social media world, as I understand, they call it billboarding. But that's a lot of impressions for $1,200. But that's not, the key things we were looking at were engagement though. So let me give you an example of what this looks like. Obviously, a lot of academia, they'll use text, like, well, is this message frame, or this message frame, or this frame? And I think there's a movement towards more visual framing. But when you really try to operationalize a concept, you run into challenges you wouldn't expect when you're just writing 4 words down, for example. So what I want to show you is a sentence. So what we're trying to do with this fresh and tasty idea was to come up with something that makes vegetables and produce and fruit kind of brilliant and attractive, product-centric. And if you went with just our survey results alone, you would think that fresh and tasty would lead the pack. Spoiler alert, what?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask, do you think, what do people see before they click or open?
I'll show you just.
Oh, okay.
Let me show you in just a second.
Okay.
So because I do have that, not another question. It's forthcoming. Okay, so all you'll notice change on this fresh taste better is the farm. You see the farm? So we're running the same ad across 4 different farms is the point I'm trying to make. And you can argue about whether we picked the best fresh and tasty. I'll tell you, we spent a lot of time thinking about photos. I think we did okay. And you go through here. So we picked it Milwaukee, Kanto, Brooklyn, etc. But so all these ads are the same. You get the same basic idea, so we're doing this across 4 different farms. And then this is what the ad actually would look like. Is that what you were asking in terms of
Yeah, kind of what they would see, because I'm mainly curious how big the Wisconsin is in that, because they all are from Wisconsin, and you were saying that you were going to target some for being from Wisconsin, that was...
Oh, that's another good question. So because of the CSA model, we basically laid a pinprick within a 25-mile radius of the closest pickup spot, right? So we knew they were from Wisconsin. There was nobody from outside of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. In certain cases, if you're in Milwaukee, for example, if you go a certain direction, you're into Lake Michigan, right? So we made some kind of tweaks around the margins. But we knew they were all within a 25-mile radius. We knew they were from Wisconsin. And moreover, one thing I'm really tired of hearing about is people calling each other idiots, whether it's because you voted for Trump or don't support climate change or this or that. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at any normal distribution curve, you're going to have people that are of average intelligence. I'm guessing in grad school you might be right of the mean somewhere. But you're going to have people who are left of the mean, right? And so that's honestly just as mean to me as being a racist. Like, you know, I'm holding you in judgment because you are less intelligent than me. Like, that's just wrong. But one of my metrics is the reason I'm bringing this up, is I wanted someone with like a mid to low IQ, if I give them a sorting exercise, to be able to go, you know, this is social norms, this is fresh and tasty, this is, like, I really wanted it to be like not super nuanced. Like, so our metric, I don't know if I'm explaining that in a good way, but I wanted it to be something that any normal person could sort these things into these categories. So if anything, I was a little heavy-handed in how we operationalize the messaging. Maybe probably beyond what you were asking. But anyway, it was all Wisconsin. And another reason that I wanted to answer that is so Wisconsin tribalism, for example. We wanted to scream Wisconsin.
Right.
We got the Wisconsin map, Wisconsin growth, White Feather Organics, Custer, Wisconsin. You know, in the headline too. So we really wanted it to, like, this one is Wisconsin tribalism. That was our intention. And by the way, this little beet right here is from where the farm is from. What?
It looks like a radish.
I would pull it to beet, but I would trust Laura.
It's a beet. It's a beet.
Okay.
I thought it was
All right. But it is, I like to validate Dominique and say it has radish-like visual characteristics.
Sure does. Red.
I may have made a similar judgment. The farmer personified, obviously in this case, I can't personify one farmer because we were actually marketing real farmers. By the way, one of the inclusion criteria for the study was that you had an active web page, because that's what we're driving you to, and we had to have an active Facebook page that they gave us administrative control over for a period of a couple weeks so we could be implementing and monitoring this. But I'm going to give you a couple examples of the farmer personified. This was actually one of our highest performing ads, but I'll go away. But point is, there's different farms. This is like kind of a sweet couple from Milwaukee, kind of garden to school, but we couldn't operationalize those the same way because they weren't the same farmers, but they're still farmer personified. Social norms is a really interesting one, and I think it's worth a second. We're good. So like social norms are what your social norms are, right? So like I'm going to Kenya later this summer, right? Like their social norm in their market is not the same as my social norm living in New Glarus. Likewise, living in Milwaukee or a Hmong community in Wausau or a super white community in Shawana. I'm just pulling those all out of the air, right? We had a lot of discussion because we do have genuine concerns about representation and diversity and all this stuff, but social norms are literally what your social norms are. And in many parts of Wisconsin, that's pretty white. That's just a factual statement, not a racial one. But we also do have communities where that's not true, right? And so you can sort of dial that in and change the images around depending on the community in question. So you'll notice subtle differences. Again, this plays up to the social norms idea, like, you know, join the crowd, join us together and buy local food. But like for Milwaukee, for example, we sort of diversified things up a little bit. And our idea, whether we made the right moral judgments, I can tell you we were very thoughtful of how we tried to approach people and appeal to their social norms. This gives you just another example of what the actual sponsored ad looks like. And I think in a way, maybe I was misreading your questions, but in Facebook advertising, if you haven't done it, it's supposed to feel as native as possible. It's supposed to feel very much like the advertising that you're seeing anyway. So I'll provide you some brief results. By the way, this is what you see. So like on this kind of examples, you see how many people were engaged on Fresh and Tasty. I don't know how many people you have been administrator on the paid page, which some of you have, but some not. So then you also see what was the reach on a particular ad. So remember, we're doing $5 a day on four different farms for 2 weeks, and so we're monitoring this over time.
So does it depend when you posted, the time of the day, where you had to control for that?
What we actually try to do is because this was our first test of this sort, we actually just tried to like avoid noise, and so we just ran it for 2 weeks, and we didn't like try and concentrate it like on a specific day at a certain time. I think that'd be a really interesting future study, but we were really trying to clean out all the noise we could out of this. And interestingly, by the way, and Ann or anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the way Facebook currently has it set up is, let's say we were running 4 ads like this. After like 2, 3, 4, 500 impressions, imagine a horse race where like one horse starts to break, right? And it starts to move, like Facebook says, shift dollars this direction, pull back these other ones. Well, because of our message testing and scholarly goals, we actually had to control that. We like, do not want you to pick our winning horse. We want approximately equal allocations across different advertising types, so it will allow you to provide this kind of data that we're providing here. This is the same idea. I'm just trying to show you the kind of metrics that we saw. But what's super interesting about here is, so what you're looking for is the lowest cost per click in terms of reaching qualified prospects. So if you just looked at our cross-sectional survey, you would have think that fresh and tasty, right? What's the most important thing? Fresh and tasty. It's kind of product-centric. What you see, and I could have in good faith, and we have in good faith, spoken to farmers and said, lead with fresh and tasty, it's universal. Well, you can see it's actually the highest cost per click. I'll give you some theories about why we think that might be so. Competing for third and fourth, and they were actually pretty close, was social norms. But then clear number one was the farmer personified. Clear number one across farms, across areas with different ideological dispositions, rural, urban, farmer personified led the day. And then Wisconsin tribalism was a clear number two. What's exciting about Wisconsin tribalism is it's so damn easy to implement, right? From Wisconsin, y'all. You know, that's Texas, I guess. But you know what I mean? Because in the long term, I want to set up templates where they don't have to go, oh, I went to your Facebook workshop, but I don't get it. Go to our website and go and download some Wisconsin templates and go load this stuff up because it's a pretty high performer and it's really easy to do. But again, I just want to point out that I'm so glad that we've been doing this message testing. It's consistent with what I'll be showing you with what some of Ann generated, is that, yes, fresh and tasty is most important, but if you break it out why, I think we unintentionally picked some areas where, like Stephen's Point was a center for one. Even though it's from Brooklyn, a lot of people came from Madison. Well, you guys live in Madison. How hard is it to find an attractive-looking squash or zucchini or orange or apple? Not that hard, really, right? But you go to someplace like where I live in New Glarus or some of the further far-flung parts of the state, honestly, ironically, even though it's rural, it's sort of difficult to find good-looking produce. So maybe that, yes, that's number one reason why I buy local produce, but I don't need a CSA in order to drive me in that direction. Some of this stuff we can test, we don't know. But if you're in a rural area like I am in New Glarus, I happen to work in Madison, or if I was in Monroe, actually Brennan's is nice in fairness. But point being is I could, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need you for that because I can get this elsewhere. But in certain communities, you're like, no, I actually need you to provide me beautifully robust produce. And we're testing some of these ideas out further. So then something else that we did, and it kind of happened concurrently, really. I think Ann actually got a faster start out of the gate. But we also wanted to test point-of-purchase signs at grocery stores. And this, Ann got, I was like the faculty advisor, I think was my title, but this was Ann's project, and I give her full due. But we ran point-of-purchase promotions at grocery stores. So she went to 2 different grocery stores and showed people books of, like, if you were to look at these different advertisements, which ones would make you more likely to purchase this particular produce. Correct me if I'm off base on this. While there was only 16 people that were approached at 2 grocery stores around Madison, the results are strikingly similar, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then basically asked impressions about the different signs. So let me show you what's going on here. So every single sign here, if you can see this, is the same visually. We picked the price because it's representative of an actual price, and we picked Honeycrisp apples because they're grown commonly in Wisconsin. So the only thing changing is the wording at the bottom. So we're testing different ideas here. The specific farm location, in this case it's Clark Family Farm, Arena, Wisconsin. That's like the farmer personified version of what we were talking about. The locally grown in Wisconsin is something we tried. These were the highest performers. Fresh and tasty, support your local farmers, join our communities with social norms, and food miles, which is something that Hy-Vee and others, I don't know if you've seen that before, but like 75 food miles. So we kind of wanted to test that just because we knew it was being used out in the real industry. Actually, let me go back. We don't have that histogram anymore, right? Or,
no, but we put these in order.
okay, so we put those in order, but what I want to show you is that, so we had our cross-sectional market research study, which Laura shared with you. But these line up really specifically with the social media tests that we did, with the #1 performer being the farmer personified, specific farmer location, locally grown in Wisconsin, #2, and then the rest of them kind of dropped off again, where there was, you know, 3rd and 4th and 5th, but they weren't as strong. And even though it was a small pilot study, it gives you an example of the kind of work we're trying to do like, you know, communication research that's theoretically informed, but also applied and field testable, and going beyond cross-sectional surveys in order to, you know, try these messages out in the field. And I have to say, I'm having a heck of a lot of fun trying some of these new methods out. And I've been fortunate to have some really excellent partners and collaborators to work on this. Laura, I think you wanted to talk briefly about segmentation. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Bret.
You're welcome.
jump back to the cross-sectional survey we described earlier and just talk a little bit about segmentation. Because it could be that some messages that Bret tested might actually be speaking to particular consumer segments. And we might consider some other ways to break up consumers. So the big picture with segmentation is that you can divide consumers or another group of people up in such a way that you have groups that are more similar to each other but more different from the other groups. And then from a marketing point of view, you can try to focus on the consumer groups that show the most potential for growth. And in local food, research has done this in a couple different ways, with demographics, with behavior, as in, people that always shop at the farmer's market, sometimes or never, or looking at lifestyle factors. And what research is finding with local food is that demographics are not a very good predictor of who's buying local. If you had to take your best guess, it would be like a 40-year-old white lady. But again, demographic predictors are not super consistent. Sometimes studies find income's predictive, sometimes it's not. And what people think might be happening is that the local food consumer base is diversifying. And what that also suggests with behavior is that grouping people by behavior might not be the most appropriate strategy either if local food shoppers are becoming a more diverse group and you were trying to look at characteristics of local food shoppers as one group, you might be missing some nuance there. So another way you could look at it is through lifestyle. And there's actually something called the food-related lifestyle. That's a theory that groups people based on their shopping, food shopping, cooking, and eating behaviors. And then you can sort of look at differences in those groups. So we haven't done any message testing yet related to this, but we did take a first step and divide that cross-sectional survey group using survey items related to the food-related lifestyle to see could we even identify groups like this. And we did. These are the most typical kinds of groups. These are the names, we didn't come up with these names, that people find when they use the food-related lifestyle. I'll just describe them really briefly. Adventurous consumers, I think of like Anthony Bourdain. These are people that like love trying new stuff, whereas traditional consumers are all about like tradition and security when it comes to food. They want things to be the same. They want like the meat and the potatoes. Or maybe in Wisconsin, they want their fish fry. Whereas rational consumers, they're really concerned about price, and they make their shopping lists, just kind of like what they say. Careless consumers, like, they like to cook and shop, but it's really spontaneous for them. They don't really care that much. And they're gonna eat a lot more convenience food. And then uninvolved people are like totally indifferent to food. So I'm going to focus on 3 of these. So when we divided up our sample, we totally found evidence of these categories. And the 3 of them that look like they have the most potential for marketing local food are the adventurous, traditional, and rational groups. So we also use political ideology as a way to categorize people. And so this adventurous group that likes new food, we found they also really like organic food and they tend to be liberal. And this is the way I feel like I see local food currently marketed. You see like recipe cards for trying new things, you use squash in 10 different ways, and you also see appeals about local food being good for the environment. However, we also found just as many people that are in this traditional group also are into local food. And this group might not really be being marketed to. So again, these are the people that like security in food. They don't want new recipes. They want local potatoes to make baked potatoes. They're politically moderate, and we also found that they have this lower sense of descriptive norms. So there might be an opportunity there in terms of correcting this discrepancy. They buy local food, but they think fewer people are also doing it. So that could be effective. And lastly, we see this rational group that's really concerned about price and convenience, and they trend politically conservative. So you could imagine messages targeting them would be really different. Can I hand it back to Bret for a wrap up?
Thank you, Laura.
Sure.
So yeah, in a broad sense, the way I've been moving towards social media messaging is you don't need to pick a one-size-fits-all message, right? You can I'm doing all kinds of work right now in forestry and local foods and lakes and wetlands. But if you were going to pick universal themes for Wisconsin, you would go with this supporting local farmers. Nobody's the anti-local farmer league in Wisconsin. And that the food is just fresher and tastier. You can't really go wrong with these messages. However, some of the political messages that focus more on some of the environmental benefits or organic may well play super well to certain audiences, but may not play as well to conservatives, for example. And as a marketer, from my standpoint, as long as I have the integrity of knowing that what I'm saying is true, it's all true, right? It helps local farmers, it's fresh, it's tasty. I'll tell you what you want to hear in order to buy more local vegetables. So if you're going to go universal, fresh, tasty, supports local farmers. Broadly speaking, when I say don't make it political, I guess we see so many things, with climate change and, biotech and gene editing, or people can kind of take these religious stances. There really isn't this divide in quite the same way with local food, which is kind of refreshing. There might be as far as organic. Broadly speaking, many rural people, which tends to be more conservative, like local food. So we can keep this less political. That our field testing didn't fully support the highlighting norms idea, but it's very clear in our survey results that the more people perceive that others around them are buying local food, the more likely they are to do so themselves. That could be an artifact of their lifestyle itself, of course, as well. And then clearly from our message testing, personifying farmers. I think not having this industrial, scary food system where I don't know what's going on, that I can picture this farmer from my community was clearly something that stood out as number one in both the social media testing as well as the point of purchase promotions that we tested in the grocery stores through Ann's work. So broadly speaking, I think I got all my thank yous in here. Aaron and Kristen have been amazing partners in the social media. Ann actually helped advise us on this project, so has been a trooper all the way through, led the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems mini grant with the point of purchase. So this has really been a team effort. Laura has been a core team member of mine for years now and all this stuff. So yeah, that's kind of it. So our goal here was to kind of give you a big picture view of like what extension work looks like when it's informed by communication theory, but also required to be field tested for efficacy for whatever outcome it might be. In this case, it's selling CSA farms. But some of the next work we're doing is promoting farmers markets, trying to get woodland owners to adopt land management practices that are oak friendly. Like, I mean, the opportunities for this are limitless. So anyway, that's our talk, and we welcome any questions for you right now.